Have you ever heard the saying that no matter how good you are at something, there's always an Asian kid who's better at it? Well, that's Orhan's entire life. He is known as a jack of all trades, meaning he can learn almost any skill. But no matter how hard he tries, there's always going to be someone better than him. So he needs to find a way to overcome his weakness. One day, Orhan was working at his desk when all of a sudden, the party leader tells him he is being kicked out of the party. Oliver tells Orhan that he has been ignoring the power imbalance in the party for a while now because he and Orhan are childhood friends and he wanted to remain by his side, but at this point, he can't deny that keeping Orhan in the party would just slow the party down. Oliver is really trying to be nice and let Orhan down gently, but the other two are being total jerks about it. Anneli and Derek both call Orhan a sack of dead weight and tell him the team would be much better off without him. And while Oliver would never have said that out loud, there's some truth to their accusations, so he asks Orhan to formally resign from the hero party. Orhan is heartbroken as he thinks back to how he and Oliver formed this party 8 years ago and quickly rose to S rank together. They were even the first to reach the 94th floor of the Great Southern Dungeon, so he can't understand why Oliver is abandoning him now. Oliver clarifies that he understands how important having an enchanter like Orhan, who is capable of using support magic, has been for the party, but last month, during a joint raid, he observed how a different S-rank party fought with their support mage, and to put it frankly, Orhan's support magic sucks compared to that girl's. And Orhan can't even deny it because he knows it's the truth. His support magic has always been mid, no matter how much he practiced, but he says the only reason his spells are so mediocre is because he was originally meant to be a swordsman, but he had to convert to support magic to balance out the party. However, before he could finish the sentence, Derek cuts him off and reminds him that the only reason Orhan had to switch to being an enchanter is because Oliver is way better at swordsmanship than he is. Orhan can both wield a sword and cast support magic, but all around he's pretty mid when it comes to his skill level, and as much as Oliver hates to do this to him, he says he has already found a replacement enchanter, so Orhan's help is no longer needed. He already knows the other two don't like him, but if Oliver is the one giving him the boot, then there truly is no reason to remain in this party. He gets up and starts walking towards the door, and as he is leaving, Anneli talks about how glad she is that he won't be here to boss them around anymore. She also tells him that he shouldn't feel too bad about himself because his skills are still good enough for him to make it as an A-rank adventurer, but an inferior fighter like him is not cut out to be part of an S-rank party anymore. Hearing that from her really stings, so he decides to go off on his own and tackle the Southern Dungeon to prove that he's not inferior. His sword skills may not be the best, but they are still strong enough for him to handle a group of goblins on his own, and since he can also use support spells, he is able to constantly buff himself with strength magic to make his fights a little easier. Getting the timing right is a bit tricky, but with enough practice, he will be able to cast spells effortlessly in the middle of combat, and no one will ever call him worthless again. After he's done goblin slaying for the day, he heads over to the teleportation crystal to register his card so he can come straight to the 7th floor next time. But while he's there, he sees another party running up to the crystal. He starts walking away because he would rather not get involved with a bunch of randoms, but as he is leaving, he hears the party members panicking because they were just ambushed by a group of orcs, and while desperately trying to escape, one of their party members was left behind. The leader tries to assure himself that leaving her behind was the right choice since they all would have died if they tried to fight. The others ask him if they should go back to save her, but the leader doesn't think that would be a good idea since they aren't strong enough to beat all those orcs. However, Orhan overhears this, and even though it's none of his business, he can't stand the thought of someone else being abandoned by their party, so he turns to the party leader and insults him for leaving a party member to die. One of the party members gets offended and tries to punch Orhan, yelling that he had no choice because he wasn't strong enough to save her. But Orhan flips him on his ass and calls him worthless before demanding to know where the girl was left behind. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the dungeon, the girl in question has been cornered by the orcs, and they are closing in on her fast. She tries putting up a barrier to keep herself safe, but there's still nowhere for her to run, and it's only a matter of time before the orcs smash through. Tears well up in her eyes as the orcs finally break through and her doom is almost guaranteed, but at the last second, a wind spell is cast in front of the orcs, pushing them back and buying time for Orhan to step in front of the girl to protect her. The girl is in shock because she wasn't expecting anyone to come save her, but before she gets a chance to speak to Orhan, the orcs begin their attack, so he runs out to intercept them. Sophia assumes he must be a swordsman, but to her surprise, she sees Orhan cast support magic on himself in the middle of the fight. Orhan then proceeds to slice one of the orcs in half, and to make things a little easier, he enchants his sword with sharpness 5 so he can deal with the rest of them. There are a lot more orcs here than he thought there would be, so he can see why the party was forced to run away, and he might owe them an apology later, but for someone of his skill level, this much is easy to handle. The remaining orcs all charge at him at once, so Orhan begins slicing through them one after the other, and Sophia is astonished because she has never seen anything like it before. Once he's done, Orhan turns to the girl and asks if she's okay, but she's so stunned that all she can do is fall to the ground and start bawling her eyes out. Orhan makes sure she's alright and helps her get out of the dungeon, and after that, he starts walking away. but she calls out to him and says she would like to thank him properly for saving her, so she introduces herself as Sophia Claudel. Orhan recognized the Claudel family name, and he also spots the crest on her cloak, leaving now doubts about her identity. He introduces himself to her as well, and afterwards, Sophia offers to treat Orhan to dinner tonight as thanks for saving her. Orhan initially tries to decline, but Sophia is really insistent, so he eventually caves and agrees to go out with her. A little while later, she leads him over to one of her favorite restaurants, and though it isn't the fanciest place out there, she really likes the food here, so she thinks Orhan will like it as well. Orhan notices that the signboard out front has the same crest as Sophia's cloak, and it's pretty clear that she must be a member of the Night Sky Silver Rabbits, one of the biggest guilds in the kingdom. The clan is extremely powerful, so he's starting to second-guess getting involved with Sophia since things might get complicated. All of a sudden, Sophia spots her sister sitting over at one of the tables, so she goes over to ask her what she's doing here. Selma explains that she had a meeting nearby, so she decided to come here for dinner, but that aside, she asks Sophia what she's doing here with a man, because she's way too young to have a boyfriend. However, after taking a closer look, she realizes that the man is actually Orhan, and they happen to know each other. Sophia is surprised that Orhan knows her sister, but there's no way he could ever forget her. Selma Claudel is the leader of the most powerful S-rank party in the Silver Rabbits, as well as the most powerful enchanter on the whole continent. She's the reason that support mages are so respected when it comes to party formations, and coincidentally, she's the same enchanter that Orhan's party used as a basis for kicking him out. He knew Sophia was also part of the Silver Rabbit clan, but he didn't expect her to be directly related to Selma. But he doesn't recall ever doing anything to offend Selma, so he doesn't understand why she looks so mad at him. Selma gets in his face and asks him if he thinks it's appropriate to be going on a date with her 14-year-old sister this late at night. Orhan understands why Selma would be concerned, so he assures her that she is misunderstanding the situation and that he has no romantic interest in her sister whatsoever. However, the way he said that makes Selma even more angry because she thinks he's saying Sophia isn't attractive enough for him. Sophia begs Selma to stop making a scene in front of the man who saved her life, and upon learning that Orhan saved Sophia's life, Selma is very apologetic for her rudeness and thanks him for his help. They all sit down together, and this is the first time Orhan and Selma have gotten a chance to talk like this. Orhan explains that they met during last month's raid, and since they were both enchanters, they spent a lot of time together, although Orhan was mostly just assisting Selma. Selma tells him he was a huge help, but that much is to be expected from someone in the hero's party. However, Orhan tells her he isn't actually part of the hero's party anymore. Selma is shocked to hear that because she can't imagine why the party would want to get rid of someone as useful as Orhan, but she's not one to miss a good opportunity, so she asks if he would be interested in accepting a job. Orhan tells her he actually wants to adventure alone for a while, so he can't join her clan, but she says she just needs someone to join a teaching expedition that her clan will be hosting tomorrow, and she assures him that he will be paid well for his efforts. All he needs to do is focus on teaching the new recruits. They plan to spend roughly 3 days down on floor 50, and they already have a group of A-rank adventurers leading the expedition, but she'd feel a lot better if Orhan were there to help. After all, after working alongside him on the joint raid, she can see just how capable Orhan truly is as an enchanter. Orhan is honored to hear that Selma respects his enchanter skills, but he was just kicked out of his party for being a weak enchanter compared to Selma, and he doesn't want to limit himself to support magic again, so he politely declines her offer. Selma is surprised since she didn't think Orhan would turn her down, but he says he has his reasons. Selma doesn't intend to push the issue if he really doesn't want to do it, but Sophia begins pleading with him to reconsider because she would feel a lot safer on the expedition if Orhan were there. Orhan still doesn't want to relive his days as nothing but an enchanter, but seeing Sophia plead with him like that makes him reconsider, so he tells her he will think about it before he makes his decision. Selma is pleased to hear that Orhan is at least going to consider her offer, but to be clear, he informs her that he will only accept if he's allowed to fight with his sword because he doesn't want to be limited to just enchantments anymore. Selma can't believe what she just heard because she has never seen an enchanted switch to swordsmanship, and she honestly doubts that Orhan would be any good as a swordsman, but she figures that if things get really bad, he will probably just go back to using enchantments. She tells him that if he decides to join the expedition, then he should come to the Silver Rabbit HQ early tomorrow morning, and they go their separate ways for the night. Before Orhan heads home, he makes one final stop at a weapons shop, and he seems to be pretty close with the owner, which is why he came here to chat. The old man prepares a cup of tea for him and thanks Orhan for his help because business around here has been booming ever since he started recommending this place. However, that's kind of what Orhan wanted to talk to him about. He informs the old man that he was kicked out of the hero's party, so now no one will listen to him even if he does recommend the store, and he wants to apologize for not being able to help anymore. However, the man tells him he has nothing to apologize for. Whether Orhan is part of the hero's party or not, he's still the same person, and he has already done so much to help here, for which the man is very grateful. Orhan may not be a hero anymore, but he's still a hero at heart, so the man tells him he should live for himself from now on and help as many people as he wants to. The next morning, Orhan heads to the Silver Rabbit HQ and meets the president, Vince Breyer, and Vince has heard a lot about Orhan, so he says it's a pleasure to finally meet him. Orhan says he's going to need a few more details on the expedition before he decides whether to take part in it or not, so Vince asks Selma to fill him in on everything he needs to know. She explains that the expedition will be to the 51st floor, but they will only be heading up to the 21st floor on the first day, and then they'll slowly progress all the way down to the 51st floor after that. Before Orhan showed up, Selma met with Vince ahead of time so they could talk about how dumb it was for the hero party to kick Orhan out. They won't be anywhere near as strong as they used to be now that he's gone, because his support magic was hard carrying them through most battles. It's true that the potency of Orhan's support spells is lower than average, but his cast speed is top-notch, at least 4 times faster than Selma's. And on top of that, he was using multiple original spells at once, while also constantly analyzing the battlefield to decide the best move to make. Vince finds it hard to believe that someone so capable would be labeled as useless, but Selma assumes that Orhan was just so good at his job that the hero party didn't notice all his contributions to their success. Back to the present, Selma is done explaining the details of the expedition, and basically, there are going to be 10 different rookie parties with 5 escorts, including Orhan and Selma. For the most part, rookies are supposed to handle things on their own, but if something out of the ordinary happens, the escorts will step in to make sure nobody gets hurt. Orhan gets the gist of it so far, but he asks why they are only bringing 5 escorts. Normally, with such a short expedition schedule, you'd want to minimize risk as much as possible by hiring as many escorts as possible. Selma makes up an excuse and says she wouldn't want to make it too easy for the rookies, but Orhan knows that's not the real reason. They must have some secret objective they are trying to achieve, and there's no way they would tell Orhan about it since he's an outsider, so he decides to just drop the question and go along with it anyway. Vince thanks him for being so understanding, and as part of the deal, Orhan will receive 2 gold pieces in advance and 10 more upon successful completion of the mission. Orhan asks if they are sure about this, since what they are paying him is the equivalent of a year's worth of living expenses for a few days of work, but Selma tells him he's worth every penny to them. The next day, Orhan shows up early at the entrance of the dungeon as agreed, and once he gets there, he sees a bunch of the new adventurers preparing themselves nearby. A few moments later, Selma and Sofia arrive as well, and Sofia seems really happy to see Orhan. A little too happy if you ask Selma, so she reminds Orhan that Sofia is under 18 and he had better not try anything with her. That aside, Selma asks Orhan why he's standing so far away from the rest of the group, so he explains that he didn't want to make the recruits nervous by standing too close since they've never seen him before. He makes a good point, but the recruits are going to need to get to know Orhan sooner or later, so Sofia offers to introduce Orhan to everyone. First up, she takes him to meet the other 3 escorts, and they introduce themselves as Anthem, Bernard, and Kathy. Both Bernard and Anthem are defenders, while Kathy is a healer, but Orhan thinks this whole thing is a bit odd since he may be able to use his sword. But Selma didn't know that when she asked him to join, so that means she was planning to go in without a frontline attacker. The reason for this is that Selma got really desperate. After all, the Silver Rabbits haven't made any progress in the past year, so she wanted to achieve something as soon as possible, even if it is a little risky, but she's not going to admit that. To avoid getting questioned, she changes the subject and offers to introduce Orhan to the rookies next. She addresses all of the recruits and says she knows they must be nervous about going on their first dungeon dive all the way to the 51st floor, but she assures them that nothing is going to go wrong because she has enlisted a group of very powerful adventurers to help in case something goes wrong. She then introduces Orhan as the cornerstone of the operation and tells everyone that he has made it all the way down to the 94th floor before, so they can trust him to have their backs. The rookies are all amazed by Orhan's accomplishments, especially when they find out that he used to be a member of the hero party. But Orhan isn't used to this much attention, so he doesn't know how to react. Now that everyone has gotten familiar with Orhan, Selma tells them to finish their final equipment check before they head down into the dungeon. She then turns to Orhan and says she would like him to escort Group 10 because they are the most promising rookies of the bunch, so she thinks they could learn a lot from having Orhan as an example. He is then introduced to the special Group 10 that Selma talked about, and he finds out that Sofia is a member here, but he doesn't understand why there are only 3 members on this team when all the others have 4. Logan speaks up and confidently says it's because none of the other rookies can keep up with them, so they were grouped together instead. Logan introduces himself as the party's enchanter and says he will one day surpass Selma, and Orhan thinks it's good that he has ambition, but his attitude is a bit of a problem. Next up is Caroline, and she introduces herself as the party's defender, but Orhan is a bit confused because she doesn't seem to be wearing any armor or carrying a shield for that matter. Caroline explains that she doesn't use that stuff, and instead will just jump out of the way when monsters get too close. In her defense, dodge-type defenders are actually a thing. Her tactic would work, but Orhan warns her that being a dodge-type defender requires some Sekiro-level evasion skills, so it's difficult for beginners to pull off. He asks if any of the teachers warned her of the learning curve, and Logan mentions that Caroline was warned many times, but she never listened to the advice, and the 2 of them start fighting afterwards. Orhan now realizes what Selma meant when she said this group was special. But on the bright side, Sophia is here too. And she's the most normal student he could hope for since she won't be causing him any problems. A little while later, they all head into the dungeon together, and even though they were all causing a ruckus outside, in here, they are behaving really well. They are all glad to have Orhan around. But Caroline wonders why someone from the Heroes Party is joining their expedition since the Silver Rabbit clan is one of the Hero Party's rivals. Orhan clarifies that he isn't a member of the Hero Party anymore, and Caroline is shocked to hear this, so she asks him why. But Orhan doesn't want to admit that he got kicked out, so he tells her to mind her own business. Even so, Caroline continues talking nonstop and mentions how Sophia wouldn't stop bragging about meeting Orhan the other day, and Sophia is a little embarrassed. But she does think that Orhan is amazing, and she's really happy he decided to come after all. A few minutes later, as they are walking through the cave, a group of wolves suddenly appears behind them, and normally, they would have to stop to face them, but Orhan isn't worried because he already left a bunch of traps behind as they entered, so any monsters that try to sneak up on them will instantly be dealt with. This way, they won't have to waste any time on watching their backs, but I'm starting to see why Orhan was labeled as useless because he doesn't tell a single person that he is basically guarding their rear all by himself. As they progress through the dungeon, Orhan gets a chance to observe how the rookie fights, and he's honestly impressed. He initially thought Logan was nothing but a rookie with a big ego, but he actually has decent enchanter skills. If he can maintain his output during longer battles, then he could easily join an A-rank party. However, for someone who's supposed to be the party leader, he's absolutely terrible at giving instructions, though he will probably get better with time. As for Caroline, she has the speed necessary to be a dodge-type defender, but she's a bit too aggressive because the second she sees a monster, she charges right at it. Technically, that's her job as a defender, but it still seems a little too reckless to Orhan. Next is Sophia, and she's not as impressive as the other two, but she's still decently skilled as a caster, and she doesn't have any obvious flaws in her fighting style, so Orhan thinks she has a promising future ahead of her. Thankfully, the rest of the expedition went smoothly, and by the end of day 1, they had successfully made it to the 21st floor of the dungeon. Selma later meets with Orhan and asks him what he thought of Group 10, and he tells her she was right about them having potential, but they don't really work as a team, especially Caroline. But Selma already knows how difficult they can be at times. It's time to head home, so they say goodbye for the day and agree to meet back up tomorrow morning, but the next day, Orhan wakes up to a terrible sight. The Hero Party has officially gone public about him being kicked out, and that means everyone in the city is aware of it now. He knew this would happen eventually, but he wishes it could have been after he was done with the expedition since all the students looked up to him because they thought he was a member of the Hero Party, so if they find out that he was banished, their opinion of him will surely be diminished. Either way, he's still going to have to deal with it, so he starts heading to the dungeon entrance for day 2 of the expedition. However, as he is walking down the street, he is suddenly called out to by Luna. She is also a member of the Hero Party, and she was always really kind to him whenever they talked, but she was away on an outing when Orhan was kicked out. He knows she would have stuck up for him if she were around, so he wonders if things would have gone differently in that case. But there's no use speculating now. Luna asks him to come back to the Hero Party because they need his strength, and Orhan is surprised to hear that, so he asks her if the others share her opinion, but she says she hasn't told the others yet. She just came to find him because she knows how important Orhan was to their team. She's serious about wanting to bring him back, but Orhan has already made his decision. He doesn't want to return to the Hero Party, and even if he did, with the news already in the public eye, it wouldn't make sense for him to return now. Luna hasn't read today's paper yet, so she doesn't know what it says about him, but she reminds him that they promised to conquer the Great Labyrinth together. Mentioning that brings up a lot of painful memories for Orhan, so he pulls his hand away and says that he, Luna, and Oliver made that promise a long time ago, yet Oliver was the one who kicked him out, so it's never going to happen now. He had always hoped that the three of them would stay friends forever, but there's no going back to how things were before. As Orhan is walking towards the dungeon entrance, he is worried about what the children will think of him after seeing the article, because it states that he was kicked out of the Hero Party for being too weak. By the time he arrives at the meeting point, he finds all the students murmuring amongst themselves about the article. They are wondering why Orhan didn't tell them that he was kicked out of the party, but before they could say anything to him, Selma arrives. She apologizes to Orhan because she hyped him up by saying he's a member of the Hero Party in front of the kids a lot yesterday without knowing he had been kicked out. Orhan tells her there's no need to apologize since it's kind of his fault for being vague about what happened. Either way, whether he was kicked out or not, it is still true that Orhan made it down to the 94th floor, and he did perfectly fine yesterday, so there's no reason for any of them to doubt his capabilities because of one silly article. Caroline and Sophia still have complete faith in Orhan's abilities, but Logan, on the other hand, doesn't seem so sure anymore. He asks Orhan if what the article says is true, and he confirms that it is more or less accurate. He was indeed kicked out of the Hero Party for being too weak, but weak is a relative term, so Orhan assures them that he is still more than capable of getting them down to the 51st floor safely. But while the others don't seem to have a problem with it, Logan is convinced that Orhan must be a bum. They head into the dungeon, and the plan is to make it to the 35th floor by the end of the day. As their supervisor, Orhan isn't allowed to actively help them until they reach the 31st floor, so until then, he just has to watch and be ready in case they mess up. But with how talented they are able to handle the lower floors without much trouble. Once they finally arrive at the 31st floor, Orhan takes over as the leader and stands as the vanguard, but all of a sudden, he tells everyone to stop because he can sense monsters up ahead. So they all get into battle positions and prepare to fight the goblins. He asks Caroline to go on the attack first, so she runs out immediately. But she got in a bit too over her head, so she might need a little help. Orhan is about to ask Logan to cast some buffs on her, but before he could even say anything, Logan has already begun casting because he doesn't think it's worth it to wait for Orhan's instructions. After all, if he's not a hero, then anyone could do what he does. Orhan can tell what Logan is thinking, but it doesn't bother him, so instead, he turns to Sophia and unfortunately, it looks like she is up against an orc. She's too scared to move since she still has trauma from nearly being killed in the dungeon, but Orhan doesn't intend to step in just yet. Logan thinks Orhan is a failure of a teacher for not saving Sophia when she's in trouble, so he's about to save her himself, but just then, he notices Orhan secretly casts an agility debuff on the orc to buy Sophia more time to compose herself. He then assures her that she is more than strong enough to handle a threat like this because she isn't alone like last time she has Caroline, Logan, and him here to support her if anything goes wrong. And with the confidence boost she got from Orhan, Sophia is able to cast an advanced fire javelin to obliterate the orc. Orhan is surprised because he had no idea she was capable of using advanced magic, and Caroline thinks Sophia seems amazing for pulling off a move like that. Orhan congratulates Sophia on a job well done, but Logan is still in disbelief because the way Orhan handled that was exceptional. Especially the fact that he was able to cast an agility debuff instantly while hiding it, and it makes no sense that the hero party would kick Orhan out when he has these kinds of skills, so he has no idea what to believe. The group eventually makes it to the 35th floor, but there, they are confronted by a giant tarantula. Logan freaks out a little because he knows none of them are strong enough to handle that thing by themselves. He's about to suggest that they should retreat, but all of a sudden, Orhan tells him to cast agility, magic, and durability boosts on the others so they can attack. Logan thinks it's crazy to even consider attacking that thing, but Caroline has already run out onto the front lines to face it. He tries to chase after her, but Orhan tells him to wait, because as a supporter, he would be at a disadvantage if he went out in front. Orhan then calls out to Caroline and instructs her to jump over the spider so she can attack its back, and as she does so, she's able to get some really good hits in. The spider is now focused solely on her, so Orhan asks her to keep aggroing it, but to make sure she avoids touching its venom. Her agility is the only reason she is able to outpace the spider, so Orhan tells Logan to maintain the buff spell while Sophia casts her attack spell. Once Sophia is done casting, she launches several air slashes at the spider, severing 4 of its legs and causing it to crash to the ground. However, the battle isn't over yet. Orhan tells Logan to cast another strength and agility boost on Caroline. At first, he doesn't understand why, but a moment later, the spider spits out some thread and starts pulling Caroline into its mouth. This is why Orhan asked Logan to cast the strength boost in advance to allow Caroline to break free on her own, but it turns out that she's still a little too weak, even with the buff. So Orhan secretly casts a sharpness boost on her dagger, and the extra bit of cutting power is enough for Caroline to finally escape. After that, Orhan tells Sophia to hit the spider with a rock bullet to finish it off, and with that, the spider has finally been dealt with. Orhan congratulates everyone on a job well done, and after that, they all return to the surface. Tomorrow will be the final day of their expedition where they make the big push to the 51st floor, so Selma tells everyone to make sure they get plenty of rest tonight. As Orhan is leaving for the day, he is suddenly called out by 2 of the other supervisors. But they aren't here to cause any trouble, they just wanted to ask Orhan to grab some dinner with them. They seem like nice people, and he never really got a chance to talk to them during the expedition, so he agrees to join them and they all head to the tavern together. Meanwhile, Sophia, Caroline, and Logan are on a carriage heading home, but Logan has a lot on his mind after everything he saw Orhan do. He recalls Sophia mentioning that Orhan saved her from a group of orcs, so he asked her if she remembers the way Orhan fights. Sophia says she wasn't really paying attention, but she recalls that when he landed, there was a huge gust of wind, and after that, he cast some sort of enchantment on his sword before slicing through the orcs. Logan assumes the spell she is talking about must have been a sharpness enchantment, and those are difficult to pull off because they work on weapons instead of humans. On top of that, he finds it weird that Orhan was using a sword to attack when he is so skilled with magic. Sophia admits that she doesn't know why he does that either, but she does recall hearing something about him converting to an attacker recently. Logan was disappointed when he heard that Orhan had been banished from the hero party, and he also felt angry at him for betraying his expectations, but he was completely wrong. Not only did Orhan function as a perfect supporter, but he also used an agility debuff on an orc, which is way harder than you would think. Debuffs are completely different from regular buffs, and even Selma rarely uses them because they are so difficult to cast, yet Orhan was able to make it look easy. He was also able to perfectly analyze the battlefield and give orders precisely when needed, and was even able to predict the tarantula's final attack ahead of time. He was much better than any enchanter Logan has seen before, so it makes no sense for him to switch to being an attacker. Caroline asks if Orhan is at least strong when he uses a sword, and Sophia confirms this because otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to take out the orcs that attacked her back then. Logan realizes that Orhan must be a genius for him to be so skilled at both magic and swordsmanship, so he knows he has no hope of outdoing him. But that doesn't mean he is going to give up. He swears to himself that he will do his best to learn whatever he can from Orhan and grow strong enough to match him in strength someday. Meanwhile, on Orhan's end, he and the others are currently having dinner together at the tavern, and they love how good the food here is. The others ask him what he used to do for fun in the hero party, but Orhan tells them he never really had much time to have fun since he was in charge of all the party's errands and busy work. That's pretty depressing, and if that's the case, then it makes that article about Orhan being useless even worse because it sounds like he was the literal backbone of the party. They tell him he should just ignore those ungrateful jerks in the hero party, and hearing others stick up for him like that means a lot, so Orhan thanks them for being so supportive. That said, they do still have a few questions they would like to ask him, because from what they know, Orhan used to be an enchanter when he was in the hero party, and according to Selma, he was a damn good one. So they were wondering why he switched to being a frontline attacker. Orhan explains that he switched to using a sword after he left the hero party because that's what he always wanted to do. He says he used to be a swordsman in the hero party, and it had always been his dream to become the best in the world, so he was unbelievably happy when he got the position. His ambition came from watching his grandpa fight with a sword all the time, so he wanted to be able to do amazing stuff like him. If that's the case, then they ask why he chose to become an enchanter in the first place, but it wasn't really something Orhan wanted to do. Back in the early days of the hero party, once they started venturing into the lower floors, the monsters they faced became a lot stronger, so they couldn't continue pressing forward with their current party composition. Around that time was when Selma's influence started spreading, so their party decided that they needed to get an enchanter, and since Orhan is someone who can pretty much learn anything, the role fell to him. That sounds pretty rough, but on the bright side, Orhan's sacrifice is what allowed them to make it all the way to the 94th floor. However, Orhan tells them that it wasn't actually a good thing. Yes, his switch did make them progress faster, but the best thing to do would have been to take it slow and gradually build their strength because they weren't ready for what was on the 94th floor. And he knows for a fact that there is absolutely no chance of the hero party making it past that floor as they are right now, and even attempting it would be stupid. The others can tell that Orhan got a bit tense there, so they change the subject and ask him what kind of swordsman he wants to become. Orhan tells them he aspires to be a jack of all trades, swordsman, someone who can make it through even lower floors all on his own. The others are amazed since they have never heard of a dream like that, but if it's Orhan, they are sure he could pull it off. The next day, we see the hero party heading right into the dungeon, and remember how Orhan said it would be stupid of them to try to get past the 94th floor as they are now. Yeah, it looks like they are about to do something stupid. The next morning, Orhan returns to the dungeon entrance for the final stretch of the expedition, and he is immediately greeted by the kids. Caroline decides to give Sophia a chance to talk to Orhan, so she mentions that it would be really nice if they got a reward after completing the expedition. She then nudges Sophia to remind her about how she wanted to ask Orhan to officially join their guild, but just as she's about to say it, Selma suddenly calls Orhan over, so he is forced to step away for now. As Orhan is walking over to Selma, he hears a bunch of the students talking about how the hero party is attempting to make it to the deepest part of the dungeon today. They are apparently starting on floor 92, and when Orhan hears this, he pauses for a moment because he can't believe they would do something so risky, especially when they just replaced him with a new member a few days ago and haven't had time to practice yet. He starts stressing out about how badly it is going to go, but then he remembers, wait a minute, this isn't my problem anymore. Meanwhile, the hero party have just arrived on the 92nd floor of the southern dungeon with their new recruit, Philly Carpenter. For some reason, they didn't bother testing their teamwork before this, but in their defense, Philly's application was stacked. 2 days ago, Philly was introduced to everyone, and she has apparently gone all the way down to the 100th floor of the western dungeon before, so naturally they assume that it should be easy for her to help them do the same in the southern dungeon. And Ellie and Derek are sure that Philly's support spells will be better than anything Orhan could possibly do, and they quickly start spiraling into how much they hated him. Derek and Ellie were especially annoyed since Orhan would never let them throw extravagant parties even though they've got tons of money in the party's bank account. And hearing them talk like that is already raising red flags for Philly, because those two sound like they would be broke by now if Orhan hadn't been managing their finances. Oliver cuts in and tells everyone to stop talking about Orhan because today is supposed to be about welcoming Philly to the party. Just then, Luna barged in because she had just found out about Orhan joining the Silver Rabbits expedition, so imagine her surprise when she found out that the others had already replaced Orhan without consulting her first. She asked them why Orhan is with the Silver Rabbits now, and both Derek and Anneli can barely believe that Orhan managed to join such a high-profile guild in just a few days. But it doesn't change anything because he's no longer a member of their party. At first, when Luna heard this, she thought Orhan had given up on carrying the party because they were holding him back, but Derek proudly states that they were the ones who kicked him out. Luna is at a loss for words because she hasn't heard of such a dumb decision since the Sissy and Kingsman drama. She reminds them that Orhan was literally the core of their party, and without him, they never would have gotten this far to begin with, but the others refuse to accept that. Derek says that no matter how highly Luna thinks of Orhan, he is always going to be a substandard loser of an enchanter, and besides, he's already gone, so there's no point in complaining about it now. Luna doesn't like it, but she knows there's no way she can convince Orhan to come back now, so she just grits her teeth and accepts that they've lost him. The others take Luna's silence to mean she finally agrees with them, so Oliver decides to go 2 for 2 on dumb decisions and announces that he wants to test out Philly's synergy with the party down on floor 92. And if that goes well, then they will move on to the 94th floor to beat their record. Luna immediately objects to the idea because she enjoys being alive. She tells Oliver that if he wants to test out Philly's capabilities so badly, then it would be better to do so on one of the lower floors like floor 30 for safety. But they all look at her like she just started speaking a foreign language. With how stupid these guys are, I'm surprised they lasted this long to begin with, and for some reason. They don't seem to grasp how dangerous it is to attempt to train a new team member on a floor that they barely beat last time. Derek and Anneli admit that it was a close call last time, but they are sure that Orhan is the only reason they had a tough time back then. So, with someone like Philly who's bound to be 1,000 times better, there should be no problems. Luna is still against this because there's a black dragon on that floor, and she doesn't want to be roasted alive. But Oliver tells her that they are doing this whether she likes it or not, and she isn't allowed to refuse. Not gonna lie, she probably should have quit right then, but she didn't want to give up on the party just yet, so she went along with it, and it's going just as bad as she thought it would. The party is currently up against a giant mammoth, which they would normally have no trouble defeating, but when they try to attack it, Oliver's sword does absolutely no damage. Derek can barely block any of the mammoth's attacks, and Anneli's fire magic might as well be a bunch of sparklers. None of them understands what's going on since they thought their attacks would get stronger now that they have Philly casting the buff spells, but it's the exact opposite. Philly can barely maintain her buffs on the party, and since she's completely preoccupied, she can't analyze the battlefield to give them instructions, so it's up to them to make decisions on their own. And if you've been paying attention to their track record, they are 0-3 for good decisions. Oliver's brain cells finally start functioning again as he realizes that he and the others in the party are actually way weaker than he thought, but he still doesn't understand why. This entire time, Luna has just been standing off to the side, watching the whole thing unfold, and she's about to explain where they went wrong now that reality has hit everyone, but all of a sudden, they all hear a terrifying roar as something approaches them, and it's the black dragon that Luna was worried about. The dragon lands, squishing the mammoth in an instant and knocking everyone off their feet, so Luna yells that they need to run away, but apparently, Derek and Anneli are still brain cells deficient, because even though they just saw the thing one-shot the mammoth they were struggling to damage, they still think they stand a chance of beating it, and Oliver joined in on their delusional optimism. They've defeated the dragon once before, so he assumes they should be able to do so again, but that was only because Orhan was here with them, and it seems they still don't understand that. Derek runs out in front to attempt to block one of the dragon's fireballs, but he did not know what he was signing up for, because immediately that fire hit, he was knocked to the floor like a piece of burnt toast. Luna immediately rushes over to start healing him, and Philly is frozen stiff with fear, regretting every decision that led her to join this party. Anneli attempts to cast a fire javelin at the dragon, and she succeeds, but that might have actually done negative damage, because the dragon was completely unaffected, and she is left dumbfounded. Thanks to her little flame attack, the dragon now has its eyes on her, so it launches a fireball at Anneli, and she tries to hide behind a rock for safety, but she still gets blown back several feet. Oliver is having a panic attack as he watches everything go wrong, so Luna yells at him to snap out of it because they all need to escape before it's too late. He finally snaps back to his senses and agrees that Luna is right, but they've got a bit of a problem on their hands because the dragon is charging up a fire blast, and both Derek and Anneli are still unconscious. Luna asks Oliver to buy her some time while she heals those two, so he calls over to Philly to snap her out of her daze and order her to cast as many buffs on him as possible. Philly does as instructed, so Oliver begins charging up his ultimate move. However, as Oliver's slash clashes with the dragon's fireball, it is completely negated, and he is sent flying back as well. Oliver falls into despair because if even his strongest attack couldn't damage the dragon, then what are they supposed to do? Luna is disappointed to see Oliver in such a weak-willed state, even though he is supposed to be the leader. But since things have come to this, she says their only option is to use the Fickle Gate they keep for emergencies. The Fickle Gate is a magic item that can forcefully create a connection between levels of the dungeon, allowing adventurers to travel from one floor to another instantly, but it is risky because you are teleported to another floor's boss room, and the floor number is completely random. Philly thinks it's too dangerous since the second they step through, they will have to fight the boss of another floor. But it's not like they stand any chance of beating the dragon if they stay, so they are going to have to use the gate and pray they get sent to one of the easier floors. Oliver activates the gate, and after picking up Derek and Anelli, they prepare to jump through. But at the last second, the dragon suddenly blocks their path with a wall of fire, and as it is charging towards them, it ends up going through the gate instead. After the dragon is gone, Derek breathes a sigh of relief because they won't have to deal with it anymore, but Luna yells that this is the worst thing that could have happened. Oliver soon realizes that this means the dragon must have been teleported to a random boss area in the dungeon, so it's entirely possible that a bunch of newbies are about to encounter a dragon because of them. Luna tells everyone that they need to get back to the guild and warn them so they can force teleport all the adventurers out as soon as possible. All guild cards come with a feature that allows them to forcibly transport registered members out of the dungeon in cases of emergency, so it's their best bet to make sure no one is hurt. Oliver is a little worried because they are bound to receive a ton of penalties from the guild for this mess, but making sure no one gets hurt is more important to him, so he prepares to head back to the guild right away. However, Luna reminds him that Anelli and Derek are still too weak to walk, so he is going to have to wait for her to finish healing then before they can leave. As Luna heals the two of them, she reminds Oliver that they are going to have to fight the dragon after they request the forced teleport, and when that happens, she needs him to swap Philly out with Orhun. Oliver wasn't expecting to hear that from her, and in truth, Luna hates the idea of making Orhun fix their mess after everything this party has put him through, but they've got no choice. She was interrupted before she could explain this earlier, but the reason everyone seems so weak now is because Orhun isn't here. She tells them that individually, none of them have gotten any weaker, but Oliver doesn't believe her because his divine slash couldn't even scratch the dragon. However, Luna explains that it was because of Oliver's own carelessness. The strength of a support spell depends on the caster, while the duration depends on the magic resistance of the recipient, and Oliver happens to have really high magic resistance, so Philly's spells only last around 1 minute for him before she needs to recast them. This was never a problem for Orhun since he was able to keep track of spell timings well. Oliver argues that Philly should be able to do the same since she has more talent as an enchanter than Orhun did, and Luna agrees that Orhun's innate talent as an enchanter was subpar. But that's exactly why he came up with several original spells to make up for his weaknesses. The others are completely shocked because this is the first time they are hearing of this, and a mage coming up with an original spell is extremely rare. Orhun's base enchantments are indeed weaker than average, but he was able to come up with an original spell that boosted his spell potency by 50 times. Philly finds that hard to believe since even Selma was only ever able to boost her spells by 10 times, but it's the truth. Oliver's divine slash works by gathering energy and releasing it all at once, and in theory, if he had spent more time gathering energy, he would have been able to do some damage to the dragon, but he got so used to Orhun's buffs, making the skill more efficient that he started putting in less effort, and the same goes with Anelli as well. She got so used to Orhun's buffs that she defaulted to only using mid-tier spells instead of advanced ones because they were easier to cast. On top of that, Orhun's spells also work on equipment as well, so all their attacks and defenses had become overwhelmingly reliant on Orhun's magic without them realizing it. All of their brain cells suddenly spring back to life as they finally realize how vital Orhun was to the party. But moments later, Oliver's intelligence takes a sharp nosedive as his ego takes over, and he convinces himself that his defeating the dragon once before had nothing to do with Orhun, even though we can clearly see Orhun carrying the team in the flashback. This was the end of episode 4. Subscribe to not miss the next part.